Welcome to the Double Shot with your favourite cousins, James and Alex Fitzgerald. We record today as it is the 22nd of the 2nd, 2022.
Whoa.
Oh, my God. If the world is ending, you've got to know one thing, James. You've got to know one thing. It was me who took the last strawberry donut. I'm sorry.
Better not have been. But no. Hey, by the way, I don't know if you... Did I tell you this or no? But I went in, had a coffee with my good friend Deegs on Sunday. He lives pretty much right next to a cafe and the bakery that I get my strawberry donut from every Sunday. And lo and behold, I got to the bakery and there was no strawberry donuts remaining. I had to settle for a white iced donut.
And in your world, that's like eating off the floor.
Well, not that bad. But
Okay, it's one notch up. It's one notch up.
Wasn't the best way to start a Sunday. Let's just say that. But hey, and gold star to you. Gold star to you, Alex, because you have probably, how many episodes are we into now, producer Nick? Oh,
Enough for you to
100?
stop running the same joke.
100. You've far and away contributed much more to the run sheet this week than I have. Thank you very much. You have absolutely put me on the shoulders and carried me this week. Gold star to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. And completely going in another direction there. I want to say shout out to our awesome clients. Sophia and Daniel, hey, thanks for listening for starters. Sometimes I don't even realize amazing clients listen until they let me know that they are in fact watching the show that I have recommended on this podcast. So I was informed last week that they're really enjoying Alone on SBS. So I'd have to say I'm also going to get a gold star, self-awarded, for that one too, cuz.
You actually do come up with quite a few recommendations. I do.
I watch a lot of shit, basically. And also, I discovered this week I have many endorsements. Now, no, not of the influencer kind. I'm not getting paid $1 million a post like Kim Kardashian, but I went onto my LinkedIn earlier today and realized I've got endorsements for all these skills that I didn't know I had. So apparently management, I'm endorsed by 20 people. They obviously think I'm amazing. And photography.
Photography?
People will endorse you for anything these days. What can I say?
I feel like photography is one of those ones where you think, I'll do my friend a favor here and I'll endorse them. And you go through the list and you think, well, I mean, I don't want to take the piss. I don't want to endorse them for something that they're genuinely not good at. So I'll just play it safe. I'll go photography. No one will question that.
Who endorses anything? Anyway, just carrying on to much bigger news because it has been a big news week and maybe that's why I've been able to contribute so much to our show notes this week. So you are welcome, by the way, if you did sneak a thank you in there. This is the great reboot for the international borders of what I found quite funny, Fortress Australia, and on the 23rd month in a row, we shall open the international borders from our hiatus. Pretty big, and they've gone to say, that number's coming back again, the $45 billion international tourism industry is about to come back. Thoughts, feelings, concerns?
I think thoughts, it is great news. I think, I can't remember if we mentioned it last week or not, but 1 in 20 of all jobs in Australia are in some way linked to the tourism industry. So it's going to be huge for people's livelihoods. 3.5 cents of every dollar spent in Australia in 2019 before the pandemic came from overseas tourists. So for the economy, it's going to be great. I think it's also just generally positive that we're back and sort of trending back to normality in that sense. I do wonder, though, I don't think that every country has put themselves in a position to open up for overseas travel. Like I know Japan, China and others, you'd still have to do a 14-day quarantine if you went back to those countries. So I guess it'll probably gradually improve over the next little period, but a huge first step for Australia to open up the borders, no doubt.
Massive, and just sort of like, I guess, going into the numbers of it, I found this quite exciting. We actually announced our borders were going to be open today we announced that they were going to open on the 21st of February. On the 7th of February, I totally butchered that. We announced it 2 weeks ago. At the time of announcing, they actually had, over the 5 days post, 23,500 tourist visas granted.
Oh, how
So
good's
people
that?
went, ooh, bang. They didn't muck around for 1 second. And by comparison, and we're talking like pre-pandy, sort of 2019 numbers, we granted about 15,000 of those tourist visas per day.
Whoa.
So
Gee whiz.
we're nowhere near that yet. And to be honest, I think a lot of people are worried about losing money before they book anything. But look, I think it's looking up on a more domestic level. And this is pretty big news for us in Victoria. This Friday at 11:59 p.m., the government have said we no longer encourage or, note a need to work from home any longer. So will that mean that next Monday we have an influx of traffic and people coming in? I'm not sure. And also offices no longer require you to wear your mask inside. So what's this going to mean for CBD occupancy? I'm not sure. I feel, cuz on the outset, it's actually not going to make that much of a difference because between staff and their employees and whatnot, there might already be sort of like a pre-arranged agreement that, has no reliance on these rules changing. But nonetheless, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, do you still have to wear masks on public transport?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's something that will stay for a little bit.
I mean, look, it can't be – it's certainly good news for cafes and restaurants. They would have been struggling, inner city cafes and restaurants that relied on the office workers coming in and giving them their business. Good news. I have to admit, if I was in an office where, there was inner city and you had to wear a mask, I would stay at home. Like the mask to me in the office would be the game changer that get me out of the house. So hopefully that is the trend that we see.
Stand by for more. I'll report back next week.
And I was going to say on a similar vein, we had the job numbers come out last week, and probably no surprise in a way that there was the job unemployment rate, I should say, remained at 4.2%, which is what it was at the end of December. Interestingly, though, there was a massive spike that they reported in the number of job ads through the back end of January and into early February. And a lot of them are in those tourism sectors.
No surprises there, cuz. And cool thing to note that these were going up just as they knew the international borders were opening. It looks about, I don't know if you just said this, but 17,500 tourism and hospitality jobs now on seek. Did you just say that? I tuned out for a second.
No, I didn't. So you've just broken news right there.
Oh, my God, amazing. Tour guides, 93% up.
Yeah, that's surprising.
I mean, that's probably just re-employed all the tour guides. I'd say like 93% basically they've now back in business, I would say. But if there was any that were working, we want to hear from you.
The one that really surprised me is kitchen and sandwich hands up 40%. I didn't know there was such a big business in sandwich hands.
Oh, that is great. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh as in like in an offensive way, but like to have on your resume or your LinkedIn like you're a sandwich hand is just great.
Yeah.
I am a bit of a sandwich hand, but not of the paid
why
variety.
Sandwiches? Are sandwiches like a real tourist favourite in Australia?
Yeah, like a big old, what are those like subs or like a bologna sandwich? Anyway, I digress.
You digress. 31% for gaming as well. So I don't know whether they're expecting that we're going to get a lot of tourism that want to get into the casinos and the gaming sector. That was one that probably I wouldn't say bucked the trend, but it's the only one in the top 10 that is a non-tourism and hospitality type of industry. So gaming, don't know, maybe there's something else that's causing gaming to grow from an employment perspective today.
That's right. And I think too with the likes of China and New Zealand still having their own domestic mandatory, I believe, I'm not 100% across, but isolation upon returning, we're losing those tourists coming in, but also those workers coming in, and they contribute quite a lot to the working population here. So that'll be interesting.
One last one, little fun fact that I liked,
okay.
hidden in one of the articles there. So 9.5 million overseas tourists came to Australia in 2019. Of that 9.5 million, 1.5 million were Chinese nationals. What a high percentage.
I'm not that surprised.
But second was New Zealanders at 1.4 million.
Ooh, nearly equal too.
And speaking to the same point before, I think New Zealand is one of those countries where you wouldn't be able to travel from New Zealand to Australia without having to do a 14-day quarantine today. Is that right? You've got connections over in New Zealand. Is that the way the rules work over there?
Yeah, that's right. So they can come here actually very easily. The problem is going back at this moment in time. I believe that they've even said that the quarantine is still 14 days till June, July. So quite a while.
And I've saved the funnest fact for last because I had to reread this 3 times. I thought, this is a mistake.
You're having way too much fun with these facts.
I know, but I love this stuff. 9.5 million people who came to Australia from overseas, they spent $45 billion. We mentioned that in the outset. Remember how I said Chinese tourists was 1.5 million, New Zealand 1.4 million?
Uh-huh.
Well, the Chinese tourists, and I got no idea how they work this out. I don't know whether they bug their cards or what, but they reckon the Australian tourism industry published some numbers that said the 1.5 million Chinese spent $12.4 billion. The 1.4 million New Zealanders, tight asses, only spent $2.6 billion.
Oh, my days. 10 billion more.
What? How do they know that, first and foremost? Like, surely they have no idea how much I spend when I go overseas. How are they? Is that just a guess somewhere? Like, is that one of the, equivalent to the bank economists who get tasked with, coming up with some sort of forecast or prediction?
No. I'm sure these Square apps and these CommBank, payment machines, they just go through the statements of the store and they see on the statements some Chinese that they can't understand. So obviously that's they just put it in the China basket.
Well, producer Nick reckons it might have something to do with the currency exchange. Maybe they monitor it through the currency exchange.
Of course. Yeah, that's
Nick,
probably a little bit more reasonable.
very, very smart and sharp. And by the way, probably extra sharp this morning because I had to make him a coffee this morning. So I've made him and I a coffee. We had the pleasure of you getting us an awesome coffee last week. Without you here in person today, weren't able to do that.
I send my condolences to yourself and producer Nick on the Blend 55.
We miss you already. All right, let's talk about some inheritances data. And I find this one interesting because they reckon that our generation, the Gen Y and the Gen X, are due to inherit more than any other generation in the history of Australia because of the cashed up baby boomers who are our parents or grandparents. Talk me through this report that you've come across, which breakdowns just how wealthy the generation above us is.
You pretty much summarised it all there. So firstly, thanks for stealing my thunder. But also, you and my dad gave me a little bit of grief last week for reading this report and finding it interesting. But it is interesting. I didn't read the whole report. Obviously, I read the summary and then the things that counted. But it's a government research paper, and they basically investigated wealth transfer and the economic effects. So not only inheritance, but also this whole discussion of the bank of mum and dad and how much they're on average really gifting to their kids for the purpose of buying property, I suppose, or whatever. And I mean, it's an interesting topic, but I'll go on to the gift part later. Takeaways from this report, I have summarised it, otherwise I'll harp on forever. Effectively, our population, like you said, heavily weighted towards the baby boomers today. So a lot of them are aging, going into retirement or are already retired. Between now and 2050, this group are estimated to pass into another life, let's say. Yes, quite wealthy.
I'm sorry.
Quite wealthy.
I'm sorry to any baby boomers listening.
I knew you were going to. Hey, I put pass into another life to soften it down. I really thought about the people listening to this. Anyway, but the main reasons they're actually passing on quite a large inheritance proportional to the last 20 years is pretty much thanks to their home values. So obviously they're not only their home values, but the very little debt that they carry on their homes and their considerable super balances. Now, just a little side note, I would also be interested to know if we're working longer so that we don't go into our super, and therefore when we die there is more super to pass on.
Definitely working longer, I think.
Yeah. This report doesn't really go into that. But also, so this generation, yours and mine, Gen X, and, the millennials sort of bundled all into that, we have a lower fertility rate. So, and that's comparable to the baby boomers. So the passing of this wealth, aka the inheritance, is estimated to reach $224 billion each year between now and 2050. So there's more of them and less of us. More money for us. $3.5 trillion is expected to be passed on to those generations. And most of them have come from the World War II generations and the baby boomers. So it's actually pretty fascinating. The most considerable inheritance that we are receiving is the homes of those who we are inheriting from.
Plus also to be shared within or by fewer children as well. So we're having less kids than previous generations as well.
Exactly.
One last thing to round out, 2% of assets are apparently gifted to charity after death, which I thought was higher than I thought it would have been. 2% I thought very generous of us Australians, particularly the older generation.
I actually quite liked that. I mean, 2% is quite a lot of that of 3.5 trillion. So that's pretty amazing. And in terms of just rounding out on the bank of mum and dad, this, I feel, is a bit skewed because they pretty much came to the conclusion that, on average, the 15 to 29-year-old is only gifted about $8,000. Now, I've also read other reports that say, on average, the bank of mum and dad have gifted about $80,000. Now, the question is, what are we declaring, what are we not declaring as gifts? But it doesn't really give us the answer on that, but it's just a very interesting paper on intergenerational wealth passing or honouring. Thank you.
Oh, good on you for reading a report so that other people don't have to.
Exactly.
Hey,
we read CoreLogic reports so you don't have to.
Correct.
And now also government research papers, so you're welcome, people. You are welcome.
Hey, let's talk about something that's got the development industry in Victoria. It's got their knickers in a knot, this one. Social housing. Could see both sides of the argument, but I do think...
Whoa!
Oh, look, I do think... I'll throw to you, in fact. You're the Melburnian local. It's been on the front pages of a lot of the Melbourne papers for the past few weeks. There is a new tax being introduced, and it is aimed at developers to take money from developers to then go and spend on social housing. What's the crux of it? What's the pros, the cons, and where does everything sit?
Geez, talk about not the time, right? We're the most locked down city in the world and we're just getting taxes on taxes on taxes. It's still proposed, right? But they're proposing a new levy on housing developments. So this is only in Victoria and it's projects from 2024. So we've got a little bit yet. But essentially what they're doing is adding a 1.75% imposed contribution on the top of new home sales to help pay for social housing. So not only has the government not done a whole lot or not taken a whole lot of responsibility on delivering a lot of social housing in the last 5-10 years as promised, but now they're sort of passing on the buck for the private and I guess also public developers to deliver, I guess, the fund for them to do so. But what a lot of these organisations are saying, like UDIA, Urban Development Institute of Australia, and also the PCA, Property Council of Australia, they're all saying all this is going to do is hurt the first home buyers and some second home buyers that are dominating those greenfield markets in the new area, and they're going to end up paying 1.75% more on top of, the value of what they would pay anyway. So it's something that the developers today aren't able to make feasible in their numbers for profitability. Obviously, we're all in business to make some kind of profit. So it'll just be passed on to the end buyer. So you're hurting, what they're saying, the first home buyers of Victoria.
Tom,
yeah.
Tom Travascus, who is the, I'm going to say president, they call it the president of the Urban Development Institute of Australia. And we met
EIA,
Tom when he used to be at Lendlease, from memory.
Yeah, good guy. Yeah,
Not sure
good
what he's
guy, old
doing
Tom.
now. I thought he made two good points in an article that you sent me in, I'm going to say The Age or the Herald Sun down there. First point was that the UDIA had done some analysis and they reckon 42% of the cost of a new home that the consumer pays goes towards taxes. So on $1 million home, that's $420,000. And on a $750,000 home, that is $315,000. That is very, very high. I'd like to see the breakdown of it, but I thought that was something I did not know.
Well, I mean, that's the biggest number that has been quoted. There's also some numbers coming from the PCA that have said on average it'll be about $17,000 on top of a home and land build, like on the average house and land, which might be about $750,000 to $800,000, which, by the way, is under the median house price in Victoria. So it's pretty wild. And then from 2024, what they've said is anyone in affordable housing will not have to pay any land taxes and stamp duties and stuff like that. So we're paying, I guess, now all those who can afford to buy to help out there. I don't know. It's an interesting one. And the industry is up in arms.
Well, I think that they're on the same page. The government and the industry are on the same page in the sense that they both agree that we need more social housing. It just seems to be the how and the amount. And I did think, he made a good point at the end of his article where he said, we don't mandate that everyone who shops at Coles or Woolworths has to pay an extra 2% on their weekly shopping bill to support families who are struggling. Because we accept that the solution to that issue involves much broader thinking, and it is a good point. That isn't what we do. With homeless and disadvantaged, people in society. There is a better and more innovative way. Probably, it seems to be that they want it to be a public and private combination. Let's hope that they can get down before in a room before this is all passed and maybe come up with a better solution, because you wouldn't like to think that the consumer should be paying 42% of their home towards taxes. There should be a better way than that.
Bloody oath. Now, just on that, and we can transition here. So we're talking about social housing, right? And how this new tax proposal in Victoria is going to help social housing. I want to transition over to affordable housing, which, because you and I know, they are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. Social housing, completely different categorization of who lives in there, and you basically, whole process of approval, etc. Affordability, similar in one regard, but more in the sense of your sort of first home buyer and your youngins being able to buy. The Grattan Institute have come out recently and said they have got a proposed solution to affordability of how the government can help young people or just any first home buyers get into the market sooner.
Correct. So the Grattan Institute was briefed by the government to go and find a way to make housing more affordable. And so they and increase, or rather reverse, the trend of falling home ownership, which I will say there's an asterisk on that, because we had the census last year. And there is data around to suggest that home ownership has actually improved off the back of home builder and the pandemic driving people to own their own home.
That's right.
But putting that aside, the question remains: how do we make housing more affordable? And they say the best solution and the best use of government funds to make housing affordable is to expand the current government deposit scheme. So the government at the moment have got a initiative that they're rolling out. 5,000 people every single year, if they can come up with a 5% deposit, the government will give them another 25%.
Ooh.
Correct? And then they borrow the balance 70%. And then over time, they buy out the government and their 25% at a low interest rate and helps them obviously get into the market. Most importantly, with a 5% deposit, which is the barrier for most people. They're going to spend $220 million on that, the federal government, in this financial year. the Grattan Institute is saying once you roll it out on the first 5,000, if it works and you get good take up and it helps, just expand it. That's the most efficient way.
Yeah. And I think too, like there's the last 2 years in a row, the federal government have had the 15% home loan deposit scheme whereby your first home buyer comes up with the 5%, and if approved through the appropriate lender, they can get 15% from the federal government and then the balance from the lender. That has been taken to capacity. So both years have had the full 10,000 cap taken out. So I think it is an interesting trial to, say we'll do 5,000. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. 30%. Oh, you're well out of the. You're well out of the LMI part but also I guess it's less risk. It's less risk for the banks as well. So the government is helping the young'uns, but also the banks probably assume a little bit less risk at a 70% borrowing.
And the 5% game changer. Now, I thought we'd finish on a headline that I saw this week, which it started again. And I couldn't believe it started this early. But I opened up the Financial Review on Monday, and the headline reads, "Dark clouds loom over country's property market." And I thought, oh, geez, that's not good. So I've read through, and they said the preliminary clearance rate over the weekend was just under 75%. From 76% last week, showing that there clearly has been a softening in the market.
Oh.
I could not believe it. I thought, you're kidding me, right?
1% down, and they're blowing the whistle. Everyone run for cover. Look, I mean, probably Sydney with a $1.4 million median is probably going to chill out a little bit. But also, your auction clearance is not a direct correlation to a market that's chilling out.
I think it had to slow down. We all agree with that. But dark clouds, I don't know about dark clouds. I think it is slowing down a little bit from the crazy levels that we saw last year. But dark cloud, I thought that was a little bit melodramatic for what we're seeing at the moment. We're still at 75% clearance rate. A balanced market is somewhere between 60 and 70. So we're still seeing favourable conditions for sellers over buyers at the moment. Obviously, every market's slightly different, but I thought, geez, they've jumped the gun. So, Michael Bleeby, you're the journalist. If you happen to listen, settle down, man.
Hey, I read a great book in the middle of last year, and it was all about sort of like cancel culture. But one of the big things I took out of it was a study was done, and it confirmed that 70% of the most read articles have negative headlines. And that is how you get your clicks. So the more negative it is, the more fear instilled in people. And then they go, geez, I better read this. I better read this so that I can, batten down the hatches, get myself prepared. So just click with that in mind, Cuzzy.
And a friend of mine who's an ex-journo reckons that the journalists themselves get indexed on a Verity score. So basically the more clicks, the higher their bonus or commission.
Oh, my days. There you go. That's what the dark and stormy.
Michael was trying to get his monthly bonus.
Dark and stormy is one of my favourite drinks on a Saturday night. I started thinking about a dark and stormy.
All
right,
the
Alex, property market. Jeez.
What a podcast. A lot to fit in. Gold star for you this week. Fantastic preparation for the podcast. Guys, if you enjoy the podcast, please recommend us to just one friend. We will, as always, be doing the quick shots this week where we take your questions. If you've got some, send them through. Give us a like on the socials. 5-star rating on all the podcast platforms. We really appreciate it, and have a great week.
Well said, my cousin. Hopefully the world does not end today on the 22nd of the 2nd, 22. Here's to us.
Ooh.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Double Shot with your favourite cousins, Alex and James Fitzgerald. If you've got a burning question or something we absolutely need to talk about on the pod, please write to us. Both of our emails are in the show notes. For little real estate tidbits and a little bit of banter, a lot of banter, you can follow us on the gram. Our handle is thedoubleshot.podcast. That, my friends, is thedoubleshot.podcast. Until next time, think of us when you sit back and sip your next double shot.